I'm talking to Ian Gawler, who is a natural cancer survivor of many, many years, a best-selling author of You Can Conquer Cancer, the founder of the Gawler Foundation in Melbourne, which, as many of you know, I spent 10 days at just after my second diagnosis, and it was one of the most positive catalysts in my journey. And I'm so excited to talk with Ian today and to share his wisdom with you guys. So thank you so much, Ian, for chatting with me and allowing me to blast you with questions.
Cool, Jess. Yeah, lovely to have the chance to talk to you.
Thank you. Okay, so for the people who may not have read your book or know much about your story, would you be able to give us like a little bit of a summary about your
Yeah, I
incredible
was thinking
story?
about this. Do you talk about your age at all?
A little bit. I've mentioned it.
What year were you born?
1985.
Oh, cool. Well, the year before you were born, I thought You Can Conquer Cancer. I
That's
thought it
so
might have
funny
been
because
around
your book
that
was
time.
like, it was my anchor when I was diagnosed. When everybody else was telling me that I was going to die and there was no way that I was going to survive, I just devoured your book and it helped me
No,
so
good.
much. And it's the one that I tell everybody to read when they're diagnosed. Mm.
Yeah, well, it's lovely to be talking to you today because I'm just sitting here going over actually the nutrition sections of this big rewrite I've been doing for the last 18 months. What happened was I got osteogenic sarcoma, bone cancer in 75, and I had my leg amputated, which changed my life fairly dramatically.
Mm.
Uh, and I was still sort of adjusting to that and coming out of it when later that year the cancer reappeared. And at that point, it was getting increasingly difficult because there was no medical cure that was available for that condition. And so I had a veterinary background, and I'd been fortunate to see the way animals could heal naturally. That given sort of just basic conditions, there's this incredible healing urge within animals that often gets them through quite difficult situations. And sure, it's nice to be a vet and help in that, and sometimes you can intervene and make a really big difference, but there is that natural healing ability. And I think in human medicine, sometimes we sort of forget it or just don't realise how potent it is. And so I thought, well, perhaps if I get a bit more thorough about that, and really look at what can create the ideal conditions for healing, I can actually recover. So
Mm.
that was the basic premise, and I got very involved in diet. And I was also very fortunate to be around in the pioneering days of mind-body medicine and when meditation was just starting to be used therapeutically. And those things helped me enormously.
So, what do you
And
credit to be the reason that you healed? I guess. What do you put that down to mostly?
I think there's a lot of things to take into account in terms of the details, but I think actually the main issue is your mind.
Mm.
Really, it all comes back to the mind because it's the mind that decides what you eat and what you drink and how much of it, and it decides what sort of treatments you do or don't have. It decides what your emotional life is, like who you hang out with and what influences you subject yourself to. And it's also covers just your basic state of mind and your spiritual life. So to me, if we had to say what's the most important thing, I think it all starts with the mind. And the difficulty is when people get into sort of crisis situations, which often a diagnosis of something like cancer can be quite overwhelming initially. Then people just don't think clearly.
Yeah.
And the emotions and just the fear, the shock can really interfere with people's minds. So I think the first thing to do is to help to develop this sort of calmer, clearer state of mind so that you can think clearly and you can actually make good choices.
Yeah. And through meditation, I'm guessing, is the vehicle to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think meditation's just so helpful in so many ways because it helps people to relax physically and to calm the mind.
Mm.
I think it's important too to acknowledge that for a lot of people, there's a need to settle their emotional state. And it's something with positive thinking, which is also a big part of how the mind can be used to advantage. That some people have this misconception that positive thinking is you've got to be bright and cheery all the time, which is beautiful. That's how you happen to be, or that works for you. But I think often when people are first facing a crisis, they don't feel particularly bright and cheery.
Definitely not.
And it's disturbing that sometimes I meet people, excuse me, who sort of worry that if they shed a tear, it's going to take a week off their life. As if it's sort of if it's that problematic. And so I think one of the other things that's very helpful at the start is to emphasise to people that healthy emotions are authentic emotions. That where people get into trouble with their emotions is where they either go overboard, or that they actually, more commonly with people with cancer, they stifle them and try and inhibit them. So finding a way to naturally and safely express the emotions that you feel in an authentic way, that's really important.
Yeah.
And that can be a matter of just choosing your company.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a matter of being comfortable to express your emotions quietly in your own space, and it's certainly something that a well-run group can help with, to create a safe atmosphere. And you probably remember something of that at the program that you went to, Foundation, that there's a really nice balance in that there is that very positive and upbeat sort of feeling, and people come away feeling really inspired and motivated, but at the same time there's a very safe and comfortable sort of place where emotion can be shared and released if that's what needs to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. That was definitely one of the best parts of the 10 days there. That, and the fact that the partners got a chance to really be in on that, and separate as well. So they got a chance to express their emotions and understand the whole thing.
And I think it's tough for partners. I mean, mostly when people get diagnosed with cancer, the emphasis is on the person who's got the problem, and in a way that makes a lot of sense. But the partners are often under a really big load, because they've got to sort of hold things together in a way.
Yeah.
And often friends and other family will try and keep the sort of brave and cheery face for the person who's ill, and then get the partner in the kitchen or out the back and sort of pour their hearts out and dump all their emotion on the partner. And if you don't have some resource to deal with that, it can be actually pretty wearing, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So I think partners need a lot of help.
Yeah, hands down. My boyfriend came with me to who you met at Young's that night to yours, and this was the first time that he really got to understand the whole issue of cancer and what was going to happen, and it was just such an important part for us.
Yeah, look, I think what you're touching on there is really valuable, Jess, is that often, like if you wanted to learn how to use a computer, you'd go off and you'd get lessons and you'd learn a bit, and then you'd practice a bit, and you'd learn a bit, and you'd practice a bit, and you'd sort of sort it out. If you want to play golf, you'd probably do the same sort of thing. Yeah. And people get these major life sort of things happen to them, like a cancer diagnosis in a family, and they just sort of blunder on and sort of hope for the best.
Yeah.
And don't think to go off and actually get lessons, as it were. Don't think to go off to something like a program the Foundation runs, or read the books. And I think it's really important to understand that when you do inquire, when you do learn, there's just so much on offer, and you can make such a difference to the outcome. Both in terms of the physical outcome for the person, the person who's the patient, but also for the state of mind and actually the well-being of everybody else that's involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So going back to your journey, I also read your biography, Dragon's Blessing, and in that I remember reading something about how you had like a mental shift that was a really big part of your healing. I think when you were overseas to see a healer in India, and he said something to you, and that caused a mental shift and it accelerated your healing. Would you be able to tell us a bit about what happened there?
Yeah, well, I mentioned, my original training and work was in veterinary science. Yeah. which of course is very allied to medicine. And that, it was a sort of a mixed blessing in a way, because before I got osteogenic sarcoma, this bone cancer, I'd treated it in dogs. So it's not an unusual problem in particularly large dogs, and it's a bit like in humans. The common first treatment is amputation, and it very commonly reoccurs. And if it recurs, or particularly in those days, it was very difficult to treat. And so I'd sort of been through that and had that sort of, I was conditioned that, you get something like that and it's pretty difficult.
Yeah.
And so when I got it myself, and had the amputation and then had the secondaries, I wanted to believe I could get well, of course, but there wasn't really any evidence for it. I'd even been into the medical libraries, and I couldn't find an example of somebody who'd lived more than 6 months with secondary cancer of the type I had. And I think it's very important when you think about how that affects your mind, because if I'd accepted that and said, well, this is hopeless, I think I could have just sat idly by and hoped for the best and been pretty confident of what would have happened, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. But I was silly enough, and it really is sort of like silly enough when you think about it, to go in conflict of all the evidence of the day. I thought, well, perhaps I can be the first. It wouldn't be such a bad deal. and I guess the thing that struck me was, well, if I don't want to die wondering. I don't want to sort of be like that, to just sit idly by and think, oh, I wonder what would have happened if I tried the carrot juice or I tried a bit of meditation. I thought, well, I'll give it my best shot and see what happened. And what actually happened was that I through having the carrot juice and the meditation, I was alive quite a lot longer than anybody expected. And by the time I got to India and met with Sai Baba, I was actually quite well, although the cancer was still very evident. And what was apparent was this sort of mental block at a sort of a deep level, I think, which was, I thought it was possible to recover. I believed it was possible, but I had doubt. And it really brought me to the point of realising the difference between belief and faith.
Yeah.
I know faith's normally used in a sort of spiritual or religious context, but in this sense it's about conviction. You can use it in this sort of area as well. And belief, by contrast, is a balance between where you think something's possible and you have doubt. So with belief, there's a spectrum. You can have a lot of belief and a little doubt, or you can have little belief and a lot of doubt. And faith is where there's no doubt. And what's really apparent is that the stronger the belief, and particularly if you get to that level of conviction with faith, anything you do with conviction, with 100% assurity, just has so much power to it. And so I got to India with this sort of, to many people I would have seen very positive. But I had this sort of deep-seated doubt that I came out of my experience and my training and, just the doubts that you have. And Sai Baba actually confronted that, and by just simply saying, you're already healed, don't worry.
Yeah.
And a lot of people could have said that. In fact, a lot of people were saying that to me. A lot of people say, oh, you'll be right.
Yeah.
But he had this sort of incredible presence, and there was a whole build-up to it. So he came at a point which was very significant. It was a real milestone. And I must admit, in a bit of a way, I was disappointed because he was quite very significant spiritual figure, and I was hoping for some sort of mystical experience and bells and whistles, flashing lights and stuff like that. And it was very, I don't want to diminish it too much, but there weren't too many bells and whistles, levitate or anything like that. It was a much more deliberate thing, actually. It was interesting in retrospect, and it was a much more deliberate thing of seeing I had a choice, actually. And I think this is why it's informed my work so much. I really came to understand that you can actually decide your state of mind. I'd been sort of through the events that were going on around me, I'd been led to believe that I could recover, but I had doubt. And what going to Sai Baba helped me to realise was I could actually decide on my state of mind, and that could be independent of other things. So that was really important, and I came away having made a conscious choice that I actually was convinced I was going to get well, and I think I didn't change a lot of what I was doing through that. But I just added this conviction to it, that was a real turning point.
Yeah. And how long after that was it before you were all clear?
About 15 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. And so, how have you maintained your health all these years? Because how many years has it been?
Well, it's 37 since I was first diagnosed, and 36 since I had secondaries, and let's see how good my maths is, 34 since I've been cancer-free.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, well, look, I actually think I stay well just by living intelligently. I think this is a problem these days. So many people are living in a way that's intellectually and emotionally, I don't know, can you think of a polite word? Sort of dysfunctional, dysfunctionally, emotionally, and intelligently. And they're not using their intelligence to join the dots and say that what you do actually influences your health.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think many people, they've either been given wrong information, like about nutrition, or they haven't actually done the inquiry. They haven't actually taken it seriously. They haven't seen the point of it. People are very fussy about what sort of petrol they put in their car and getting their car serviced.
Yeah.
And they just think they can put any old rubbish in their body and it'll be fine. And I mean, that's just dumb.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, our culture's paying a very heavy price for that stupidity. Because so many people are getting these chronic degenerative diseases like cancer and heart disease and type 2 diabetes and MS. And they're all preventable. To almost completely preventable, to a huge degree preventable.
Yeah.
For myself, I think I was fortunate getting cancer rather than heart disease. Heart disease is a bloody useless illness, really, because it either kills people and you don't get any chance to do anything about it, or people recover from it really quickly. They get a big shock and they think, I better change my diet and exercise and look after myself. And then then their heart settles down and they have a bypass or something like that, and then you go, I'll be right.
Yeah.
And back to doing what got them the heart attack in the first place.
Yeah.
And so cancer is actually a much more, if you're going to get really nasty illness,
cancer's a great one.
because it lasts long enough to get your attention.
Yeah.
And to actually get you into good habits.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big issue, that what we're really talking about is getting into a habit of living well, like having a wellness sort of agenda running in your life. And the unfortunate fact is that we live in a society where that's not actually supported well.
Yeah.
Much easier to go into any city or town and get food that's bad for you to eat than to find food that's really good for you to eat. And it's just unfortunate that the health of our society is being run by corporations who seem to have not worked out that you can make money ethically in a way that's actually really geared around people's good health.
Yeah.
And they're much more interested in just the fast food and pandering to people's greed and stupidity.
Yep, absolutely.
So I think that's the thing to really be aware of if you're trying to actually look after yourself, is that, you actually have to work at it. Go and create an environment that supports it. That's why I think what you're doing with your website and your blog's terrific, because for people who hook into it, it sort of provides that support. And it's really, that's what people need. You actually need to look, where can I get the sort of motivation and the inspiration, but that ongoing support that sort of keeps you doing what you know to be right, but which the culture we live in would be quite happy if you didn't do.
Yes, absolutely. That's why it's so easy to fall off track.
Yeah.
And why I always say that it's such a blessing to have cancer.
Yeah, well, and I see it happen, I think, disturbingly often when people get well.
Yeah.
They recover, and then as the years go on, they just get worn down by, the busyness and the culture and, the fact that so many people aren't eating well, and it's like, have a bit of this, it won't hurt you, and it just gets eroded. And so I think it's really something to be conscious of, that you need to actually think about, how do I actually support myself, and what are the choices I make in terms of who I hang out with, or what I watch, or what I follow, so that I can actually keep on track with being well. The thing that's happened, which you probably familiar with, is that when you eat really well, and particularly if you meditate as well, you become much more aware and much more sensitive. So, if I go travelling, I can never eat as well as I do at home. And I'm all right for a week or two, but after that, or even after a few days, I don't feel quite as well as I do at home.
Yeah.
It's not bad, but it's just not right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if I eat anything that's really off the wall, which I very rarely do, it just, my body lets me know.
Yeah.
So that's a really good thing, because that's very experiential. And I think that helps a lot of people that I've worked with, that it's all very well to be theoretical and talk about what's good and what's bad, and what you should and shouldn't do and all that sort of stuff. But if people experience it, and they get to that point where they've got that sort of bodily awareness and that mental awareness that tells them when they do something that's off track, and they really feel it, then that's much more useful.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what's your advice to people who maybe have just been diagnosed with cancer, or who have a family member who's just been diagnosed?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that are really helpful. First is that hope's real.
Yeah.
And that, the hope that I think people should aim for is firstly to recover from the illness, but then to use the illness in a meaningful way. And I think often at first diagnosis that doesn't seem like high on the priorities. But I hear from so many people who, down the track, like months or even years, who realise that actually cancer was like a wake-up call, and that if they took it seriously, which these people do because they're talking about it, that it actually helped them to change their life for the better. And it's, I guess, it's sometimes a bit tough to face the fact that your life's almost demanding that you do that. So you don't get rebellious and say, no, bugger it, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing anyway. But see this as an opportunity, actually. Because what helps you to get well from cancer is, I guess, just living well, eating well, having a good emotional state, using your mind positively and effectively, and spiritual life can really add to it too. So I think the first thing is to realise that there's real hope. That it can actually be something that can be got through in a physical sense, you can recover, but also that it can be quite transformative personally. And then the second thing, I think, is to get informed, and to find out what your options are, and what's going to be in your best interest, and to appreciate that there's two sort of avenues of help. One is what can be done for you, both by the medical world and the world of natural medicine, but they're things that like things that you take or have done to you, and then to realise that there's your part in that, which is what you can do for yourself, and so to learn about how you can get the best out of your situation. And I think, I guess, good to give my book a plug. It's Well, people need something like that, I
They
think,
do.
that they're speaking from a patient's point of view. That's not speaking from the medical point of view,
Yeah.
but it's very much coming from the patient's point of view about the the experience of people who've done this, and can get you started and
Yeah.
head you off in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the inspiring success stories that really do give us faith and prove that
Yeah,
it can be done.
yeah,
Because if it's been
yeah.
done before, it can be done
When
again.
sorry, when I recovered, Ainsley Mears, who was a psychiatrist who introduced me to meditation,
Yeah.
um, uh, he said it only has to be done once to show that it's possible.
Yes, I had that written
That's
on
very
my vision
true.
board for so long. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great saying,
Mm.
really. And in a way, actually, my case isn't probably all that good because I did so many different things. Um, but, we only have to see one person who got well without medical treatment to know that the body can do it. And there's certainly there's lots of those people around.
Yeah.
Um, and, in some situations, well, if you look at the fact of the matter, about 65% of people who get diagnosed with cancer will be alive 5 years later these days.
Mm.
So for a lot of people, medicine is actually quite useful.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me that if you're going through medical treatment, that it's obvious that quite a lot of the treatments are actually tough on people. Things like chemotherapy, radiotherapy, surgery, they can all be pretty tough. So you want to look at how you can get the best out of the treatment and minimise the side effects. So the sort of stuff that we're talking about, which is like lifestyle medicine with food and meditation and positive thinking, all those things, that's just a natural adjunct to medical treatment. They should go hand in glove. But then when people have got a cancer where there isn't a medical cure, it's very important for them to understand that they can actually really work on their own potential for healing, and that may well get them through. And if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. It's not easy, and there's not a guarantee, but it's certainly worth trying, and certainly great to hear the stories of people who have been able to do that.
Absolutely. Definitely.
And look at somebody like you who's actually quite bright and cheery.
Yeah. That's been nothing but a blessing, and I feel like having no medical option was the biggest blessing for me. Like, it's just
Really, yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, well, it's tricky these days because I found back in those early 80s when I first started running groups, many people were put into that category. And medicine was a bit blunter then, and many people were told, well, look, there's nothing more we can do for you. It was basically the go home and die message.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And in a way, that was helpful because it actually meant that people, if they wanted to get well, they knew that it was difficult. They knew that they really had to give it their best shot.
Yeah.
And what's happening these days is many, many more people are going into what they call palliative treatment. So they're being offered things like chemotherapy in a palliative sense, which is that sad. It's not going to cure you, but we hope it might extend your life, and supposedly it's meant to improve quality of life. The difficulty is that many of those palliative treatments, and palliative chemo is a good example, can actually be hard on the body's ability to heal.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a conflict there, and I think in some ways it's more difficult these days. Mm. And as you say, having no options medically, in one sense, it makes it very clear, doesn't it? It's easier in a way.
Yeah.
And I think it's quite difficult for people these days to try and add up the cost and the benefit of things like palliative chemotherapy and try and work out which way to go. Not easy.
Yeah, I think that's why the more we need to get this message out there, that it is possible to heal without it, because people don't trust themselves, and then they just go for what the doctors are offering them.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think to do what you've done, you either need desperation, if I can be blunt.
Yeah.
Because I think that was part of what got me going. I mean, you think, well, I've got to do something, and what's the most potent sort of thing I could have a crack at?
Yeah, that's how I chose to.
But then, as you go on, it actually becomes a more intelligent option. I think most people sort of almost get freaked out and get into it as a starting point out of desperation.
Yeah.
But once you get into it, you realise, well, actually, there's a lot of good sense in this, and it really does make sense. But I think, and it develops that inner resilience, your own confidence in yourself. Once you've been through something like you've been through, it's inevitable. You have a bit of confidence in your own capacities because you've done something quite extraordinary. And whether that was sort of thrust on you in a way. But you were smart enough to go with it rather than sort of, just sit idly by and hope for the best.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people these days have lost confidence in their bodies.
Yeah.
And often getting a cancer diagnosis does that to you anyway. You think, oh, well, my body's let me down in some way. It's got sick with this pretty nasty illness. So, I think it's important that people understand that their bodies are actually exquisitely well designed.
Yeah.
Given the right circumstances, it's amazing what they can do in terms of healing and keeping us well. That's what they're designed for, and given them the right opportunity, it's amazing what can happen.
Sure.